For the past week and a half, we've been biased towards a general bounce on Bitcoin into the deep $90,000 territory, potentially even getting into the low 100s, maybe even being a major reversal. However, I do still look at this bounce with a lot of skepticism, which we'll go over essentially why that is. But first, Bitcoin is very likely to bounce here and carry on with this bounce as the FOMC meeting does loom overhead, coming in on Wednesday. Hot, real fucking hot, as we probably do get some actual exciting price action during that time. But until then, Bitcoin is snaking its way up. This is a very constructive lower term time frame look, as we have been saying for the past week and a half. So I am still looking for this bounce to continue up and to the right, more or less. So we'll go over general targets for this bounce, and then what condition, if met, would actually confirm a real reversal here, thus indicating that Bitcoin is not just experiencing a dead count bounce, but actually going to pull through the loop and go all the way to Santa's top rally of 100 billion kajillion dollars and make new ultimas, I guess. Anyways, first things first, let's go over the shorter term sort of look here. We were looking at the 6-hour time frame and the 4-hour time frame at the end of last week, constructing what would be an ascending trend right here. And Bitcoin does look like it is about to complete a higher low with Sunday's low, which I'm a little bit surprised of. I did think it was going to come maybe about $700, a little bit lower towards 87, but ultimately any sort of a higher low is a good thing. And more or less, Bitcoin is now on the verge of confirming a breakout here with any sort of a closure above last Wednesday's high, which is 93,800. Bitcoin right now about $400 above that pivot, with another hour and 12 minutes left to go on this current closure. So ultimately, I am looking at this one as, potentially about to break out today, pending that confirmation. And because this is a technical formation in the format of what would be an ascending triangle, that does have a measured move or an implied target actually all the way up above $100,000, about 103,350 if you want to be super exact. Now, of course, I do think that there are a few areas of interest along the way, but yeah, that is a technical measured move right there. And of course, that is going to play sort of hand in hand with our other setup that we were looking at over here, which is the inverse of a setup that we've seen so many times over the past like 4 to 5 months now, which has been helping us get that downside bias, especially since the highs in October. And ultimately, this is the inverse of the 4 versus 21 EMA, or the red versus yellow moving average right here, in which case the lower period represented by the 4 EMA, the red one, is crossing above the higher period, the yellow 21 EMA, and that generally gets a minimum corrected move, in this case, to the upside of the green 55 EMA, which right now is about 98,000 bucks. That is, like we have gone over for the downside setups, a minimum target, meaning that ultimately, Bitcoin can go above there, but that would be like a minimum target for this corrected move, assuming that Bitcoin does confirm the cross on today's closure of that red and yellow moving average, which I do think is actually rather likely. But hey, Bitcoin just needs to basically close above, according to Caretaker's reverse indicator right here, about 94,000 bucks. And realistically, it's going to be much lower than that, because when we get the new period for tomorrow, that number will come down significantly. So whether it's today or tomorrow, unless if Bitcoin really reverses significantly below like 92,000 bucks, I do think that you will inevitably be seeing this cross, and it will be, higher low number 2 right here on the daily time frame. And at that point, yeah, seeing a move up to about 98,000 bucks as a minimum target, I do think is rather relevant. And that would be, if we can go back on over here, sort of the bottom end of this blue box territory. I have to check that a little bit higher, but that would be between about the 200 simple on the 4-hour time frame and the general area of interest, or the general measured move here, at about 103,350. So somewhere in that pocket, I do think is rather likely. Generally, these things do play out. And of course, with an event like the FOMC meeting tomorrow, there is a catalyst in the background as well to kind of play hand in hand with that. So that is also going to be combined with another major setup that we did identify as likely to fire off at the end of last week. It has fired off and it is now active, and that is the 5-day HPDR setup right here. Again, whenever the price action gets very far away from that median, which is what my cursor is currently tracing on the HPDR indicator right now, whenever price action gets very far away from that, well below that 50% of historic returns range low in this current case, all the way down here. I mean, that just doesn't happen that often. And then when we see volatility start to contract, represented by the BBWP indicator getting a negative slope, and in this case also coming down below the moving average here, that sets up an extremely high probability move to re-meet with that median. Again, the number that my cursor is currently tracing right here, before anything else involving new lows. So just kind of packed up that up into one statement. When we have this setup, what I'm essentially expecting to see is a retest or a reconnect with the median, instead of closing below the current lowest price of this downside move. So that would be 80,500. That does imply Bitcoin could get a wick down around there. In this case, I don't think you're going to see that. I think you're seeing bounce first. And to be fair, when we zoom out to the higher term timeframes, I mean, there is, some hopium here for sure, because that would be a higher low compared to the April lows at about 74,000 bucks. And there also is potential for hidden bullish divergence. That's the weekly RSI did make significantly new lows compared to that April/March low as well. So you would have potential for hidden bullish divergence right here, and also rejection of the bearish control zone. Now, I still have my own reservations with this, but hey, if we are going to see Bitcoin reverse here, we wouldn't just be looking for an upside move into the low 100s. There's a very specific condition, in my opinion, to actually confirm that, hey, Bitcoin is not, I repeat, going to put in a dead cat bounce. It is going to actually reverse, and it's time to be actually really fucking bullish because, new highs are likely incoming. My personal opinion is that this probably doesn't happen, but hey, the actual analysis is just, hey, as long as Bitcoin's below this lower high here, this lower high at 107,500 bucks. Let me just double check. Sorry, 106,600, or yes, no, sorry, it is 107,500. Okay, 107,500. Jesus Christ, I thought I was losing my mind there for a second. Probably am losing my mind looking at this fucking magic internet money for so long, but but yes, that's the lower high. That is incredibly important here. And of course, if Bitcoin can reclaim that high at 107,500 on a daily closing basis, very specifically, I will turn into a pretty much very, very ignorant bull. I'll turn into fucking Crown Brunswick bulls, I guess. Something like that. Anyways, we also do have some technical signals, suggesting the upside is likely from here. We did see a drive of phantom bullish divergence confirmed on yesterday's low. So that is overall good. Or sorry, this weekend's low, but that's continuing up now. And then of course, when we go over to our stochastic momentum charts, if I can find it, we are seeing, as we identified in yesterday's video, all of the sort of medium to lower end of the higher term timeframes agreeing with each other. So, my rule is when I see all these agree with each other, I'm just not going to bet in the opposite direction. And if I have to make a bet, it's going to be in that direction. So in this case, daily timeframe, let's actually go to CME. This one's a little more clear. Daily timeframe continues with upside momentum as long as Bitcoin's above 86,200. Okay. The 2-day timeframe also kind of freshly up here, getting out of the bearish control zone, shows upside momentum as long as Bitcoin's above 85,700. Okay. Also good. 3-day timeframe, also a fresh cross the upside for the first time in, many months, by the way. And that remains as long as Bitcoin's above 83,000 bucks and change. The 5-day time frame is going to have its first cross the upside in a very long time, since basically April of this year, by the way, assuming that Bitcoin can finish the next period above 90,000 bucks or, and change. And then of course we got the weekly time frame. This one's also going to follow through. Same sort of pivot here as well. And then the 8-day time frame, this one's still pretty nastily down, but I imagine once we get the new update, that should align with some upside, continuation there. Now, this is again contrary to the very high term timeframes like the bi-weekly. The bi-weekly remains to the downside as long as you're below 116. The 3-week time frame also showing downside pressure below 118,800. The monthly time frame also coming down here significantly below 123, and the quarterly time frame also having its first cross the downside below 105 by the end of December. So, when I see these time frames kind of disagree with like the very, very high term time frames, it does make me again skeptical that this is going to be the bounce that actually creates a reversal. But it is a potential here. It is a potential. Those are my conditions to actually confirm a real reversal, again, above 107.5. Until then, I do think that this bounce has legs. I think that this bounce can go up, pretty decently here. Like I said, anywhere between, let's call it 98,000 bucks on the lower end to as much as, 103,500 on the higher end. I think that's your high probability zone of interest. But from there, then it becomes a question of, okay, are we seeing a rejection or not? If we see a rejection, I think that's a really, 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 really bad signal. But until then, there is potential for a real reversal here. And, I think that that's something to be excited about. Now that we've gotten all of the looky-loos away from here, let's go over the real analysis. How about some witches? How about some fucking witches over here? Because we do have the bull moon. And again, the bull moon, while it doesn't necessarily have like great stats, to be honest with you, as whether it's likely to produce a positive period or not. I mean, it's just over 54.25% of all of these setups basically producing positive price action, which is an okay equity curve to be fair. But what I'm really interested in, and what actually adds a lot of value to predicted price action, is looking at the average winning trade and the average losing trade, because we do have a time frame to be expectant of this, and then just general areas of interest. So let's see if this lines up with anything else. And in this case, we can see a 13% move to the upside, which is your average bounce. Again, there's going to be some variance here, but where does that put Bitcoin, respectively? about 104. So that's with, that's kind of around where we were looking at earlier. And then, of course, to the downside, 8% to the downside puts you back down around 84,000 bucks. And we'd be looking for that sort of price to be settled at sometime between now and the 19th of December. So, I'm more biased towards the upside here. I like the higher lows. We've been generally looking for a bounce at the beginning of the month of December. And we also, if you recall over here, the December monthly stats were very interesting because the low of December in terms of the date of December usually is very early within the month. If it's going to be a positive closing month, but I actually do think this December will be, even if Bitcoin ends up being bearish, you generally see the low of the month within the first half of the first week of December, around day number 3.5 to 4, which right now we're on day number 9. And actually, there's been only one time in Bitcoin's history where we've seen the low of the month come on the 9th day and still be a positive closing month. So the further out that we go from here without just, not making new lows, just the more and more like this will be a positive closing month. And I do think that those stats will play out. And hey, if Bitcoin does reverse and confirm a real reverse here, I'll be very, very happy. But as I did state earlier, there are still a lot of issues on the higher term time frame. So let's go over my options positions here as well, just because, this one's still going to be doing quite well, but let's just see, or let's go to the strategy builder. But I just want to follow up on this because it's quite fun actually. But here you go. Let me just show this over here. So again, my position is going to produce $29,300 in profit as long as Bitcoin's above 80,000 bucks by the end of December 26th of this year. That's actually Elsa's birthday, which is rather easy to remember for me as well. However, when Bitcoin rallies up here, I will consider doing the opposite sort of strategy in which I sell a call spread, probably the 110 to 115 strike. I just want to see what the premiums look like if and when Bitcoin does get up to about 6 digits. But that would be the next sort of move that I'm looking to potentially make on this rally. But I'm looking for something very specific. That's just the idea that I have right now. I need to see a rejection very, very importantly. And then from there, I would be happy to take a position. But for right now, very, very happy with this one, obviously. And ultimately, I'll probably end up closing this relatively soon just because this is, dead premium at this point. And this is, in my opinion, quite a good win. So I shall turn it off from there, get out of this right there. And other than that, let me just make sure that I've hit all my notes. Boom, boom, boom. Yep. Okay. We got all that. Oh, fuck. Okay. I did want to make an announcement. I'll do a video on this a little bit, more in detail later on. But I am going to be, or if you look in the description below, I actually have a referral link for the Gemini Bitcoin credit card, which is actually, in my opinion, quite cool. You don't need to fucking trade or nothing like that in order to use it. But basically what it does is that it gives you Bitcoin back. It gives you Bitcoin back instead of your usual credit cards, which give you a few percent back in US dollars or in points is what it typically amounts to. They give you points, points. But in this one, if you do want to accumulate Bitcoin, I think it just makes a lot of sense, especially if people who are looking to be more of a long-term investor, just kind of, naturally DCAing and assuming that you actually pay off your credit card, every month, which if you don't, then I would strongly suggest not to use a credit card. By the way, don't fucking sign up for this credit card if you can't pay off your full balance at the end of the month, because you just run into issues from there. That's how these companies really make their money, obviously. But if you can pay it off, it's a great deal because it gives you Bitcoin back. So you're basically investing in Bitcoin every time you spend a buck, whether it be online or at the store, or whatever. It basically works everywhere from what I understand. I just got it myself as well. So I'm looking forward to using it because at the end of the day, I'd rather have fucking Bitcoin rewards rather than points reward. My points. Yes, my little itty bitty points. But Bitcoin actually has potential to appreciate and also depreciate as well. So something to be considerate of. But hey, if you're, if you are of the long-term investor mindset, I think it could be a good do, especially if you are, and only if you are able to pay off your full balance at the end of the month. If you can't do that, probably no credit card is good for you, to be honest with you. But yeah, anyways, I'm not here to be your fucking dad. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but that's just my take on it, whether you care about it or not. So fair enough. Anyways, just wrapping up Bitcoin here. Still think that the short term and medium term is a bounce. I think that this is the time to be looking for deep 90s or low 100s. I don't think based off of today's price action that we will see the higher low come in at 87. I do think it will be the low of this weekend. So the person who called this out on yesterday's live stream, they are correct. I was looking for maybe a slight extension to the downside, but still ultimately a higher low, ultimately the same thing. Now the idea goes to, okay, how high does this rally get? Again, technical targets anywhere between 98 to 103.5. I suppose we'll come back at it tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have more, more information on this picture. But for right now, just continuing to see this bounce play out. And I expect that tomorrow's FOMC date should be very revealing into where this one does end up. So other than that, want to wish you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow on the good old live stream fucking baby.